العالمين يا إمام الرشد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وعصمة أمرنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين رب يسر وأعين يا كريم وافتح بالحق إنك الفتاح العليم. When we say that we follow the sunnah of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what do we mean when we make that large claim? To be honoured by attribution to the perfect pattern, body, mind, spirit of that fair man, when we make that huge claim about ourselves, to be trying to put our feet in those perfumed footprints, what are we saying? Essentially, we are saying that we affirm the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He has created man fi ahsani taqweem, in the best of forms. But when we look within ourselves, if we look with any honesty, usually the sight is so disgusting that we don't like to look deep or long, but when we look within ourselves we see anger, resentment, fearfulness, jealousy, desires of 1,000 ugly kinds bubbling away in the cesspool that is just beneath the surface, which we build up in order to convince the world that we are what we are in fact not. That's the reality. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that we are not for that, and that we can be something so much better that it's hard to imagine that we're from the same species. To be without those vices, to be without those desires, to be without those insecurities and all those ugly qualities, what could it be? Could we imagine ourselves without those things that are so important in driving most of the things that we do? The vices that pollute our intentions, the 1,001 complicated reasons why we do things, the lies that we tell to ourselves, the doubts that we have about Allah's power in creation, all of those ugly things just beneath the surface. What would we be? Who would we be if those were swept away? Well, what we would really be would be not angels, bloodless creatures floating from another sphere, but we would be ourselves, Adamic. And the true nature of human beings, the imperishable jewel which is the ruh, would shine out from our faces and would illuminate the world. At the moment, the world looks at the ummah and it sees the nafs ammara bisu', the envy, the jealousy, the suspiciousness, the endless conversations about what other people and other Muslims are doing that is wrong. And they don't see the diamond that is the prophetic heart. They look, sometimes with sincerity, but they do not see that diamond. خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ is a challenging statement. Allah created us in the Adamic original version of our species in the best of forms. The angels themselves could bow down to us, which is a pretty extraordinary thing. One of them rejects this, but this is the divine commandment. But we are not entities that anybody could bow down to in our current state, although our egos want the world to bow down to ourselves. We have become asfala safilin. This is the state of mankind. Everybody is running after pleasures that are falsely presented as offering them happiness and self-esteem, but it doesn't seem to work too well, and we're mostly grumpy, unhappy, unsatisfied. In the wider society, rates of depression, divorce, addiction, malfunctioning aspects of humanity are becoming more and more endemic, and we have to take pills. The pharmaceutical industry is all that stands between humanity and mass despair. It can seem like that. But fi ahsani taqweem, the best of forms, means that the beauty of the divine shines forth potentially in every human soul. But that's an abstract thought. We need to know where and when and how it might actually be possible. Looking at ourselves, in this iron grip of the gravity of our own weaknesses, it might seem impossible that we could escape that gravitational field. And when we make tawbah and we escape for a while, we soon come back to earth again with a resounding thud, and we're maybe as bad as we were, if not worse. How can we escape the gravity of this mass that pulls us down? Well, we know that it's possible, and we know that it has been done, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the capacity to achieve this, as it were, escape velocity, like the rocket that's powerful enough genuinely to escape the gravity of the earth and to fly to the heavens. We can do that. And the image of that is, I suppose, the Mi'raj of the Chosen One, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that if you're truly in control of the buraq of yourself, there is really no limit other than the Sidratul Muntaha itself, to which Allah in His mercy and His light can take you. Any one of us, irrespective of what you might be regarded as in the eyes of the rest of the world, any one of you can ascend. But we don't, because we're preoccupied with the pleasures that the world thrusts constantly before our noses. We're all like sheep, munching at the grass throughout our lives, looking down and looking down, never once looking up at the sky. That's the state of humanity today. But it is possible to achieve liberation, itlaq, escape. And you know it's possible because it has been done and because we have been given exemplars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given His grace to certain individuals who show what we were created to be, without envy, without rancor, without vengefulness, without forgetfulness, without ugliness of any kind. And these are the Anbiya alayhimus salam, and in their way those who tread in their footsteps, who are the awliya. It can be done, it has been done, and those who love them have really understood the purpose of creation and the divine intention behind creating man. It's essential, an axiom to understand the greatness of which Bani Adam is capable. So when we say that at a certain time of year we are engaged in a commemoration of a certain historical individual, what we're really saying is that we are celebrating the fact that we can indeed achieve escape from the mess in which we find ourselves, the mess in our relationships, the mess in our mistrust, the mess in our capacity to concentrate, to understand, to work, to be honest. All of that mess, we can escape from it. We can become free. It's a breathtaking possibility. And the materialistic world will not allow that possibility because it says desire, the body, materiality, this dunyawi life is all you're ever going to get. So enjoy as much as you can before you die and head to the crematorium. The only rule being that you shouldn't get in the way of anybody else's desire to do the same kind of thing. But to go upwards rather than downwards or horizontally is really hardly dreamt of. Even religious people, in most cases, are preoccupied with their own little parochial arguments against each other and concerned with people's esteem for them or with suppressing certain scandals, and we can't claim to be better. Although we're told to be better, the reality is that often we put people off this whole possibility of self-transcendence and ultimately happiness. That is our reality. So to be a Sunni Muslim is to affirm the possibility of following a style of life that gives us liberation from those chains, from those ugly things, from the sewer within, from the dirt that is in our hearts, and return to something extraordinary, luminous, which is sa'ada itself, happiness itself, true freedom, true liberation from anything other than the only one to whom we should truly be slaves, subhanahu wa ta'ala. One aspect of this is that to be a Sunni Muslim means to be in al-mahajjat al-bayda, the broad path. The beauty of the Sahaba is that they recognized the differences that existed amongst themselves. Their fatwas were different. Their political allegiances at the times of the early fitnas were different. There were men of absolute passions and women of absolute conviction, and sometimes they were divided. But the way of the Khawarij is to pass judgment on some of them. And the way of the Shia is to pass judgment on others of them. But the way of the people of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah is to give them all the benefit of any possible doubt. As-Sahaba, kulluhum udul. Every last one of them, tens upon thousands of people, men, women, children, kulluhum udul. They are all upright witnesses. Any one of them can witness to your marriage or bear witness in a Sharia court. This is the moral breakthrough that is what it is to be a Sunni Muslim. With all of their difference, we love them all and we acknowledge them all. That, in a nutshell, is what it is to be a Muslim of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the doctrinal concretizations of that come later and they're necessary, but the essence of it is love for all of the Sahaba. But note the implications of this. Sunni usul is characterized by one thing more than anything else, which is respect for ikhtilaf and for differences of opinions. We have our four madhahib. In the early period, there were more than four. The madhab of Dawood, the madhab of Abu Thawr, the madhab of Al-Awza'i, respected. Madhahib, for various historical reasons, they didn't endure. They don't exist in our time. We ended up with four. But those, although they're different, in their usul and their furuq, respect between them is what it is to be a Sunni Muslim. And respect within those schools and between those schools is what it is. In other words, what makes us authentic adherents to the Sunnah is respect for the possibility of difference. So when at this time of the year we see the Muslims disunited by something that is a far' and not an asl, which is the celebration of the birthday of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when we see that disunity, we realize that we're not quite being Sunni. This is a Sharia matter. It's a fatwa matter. It's a matter of ijtihad. The scholars have different opinions. My scholars, rahmatullahi alayhim, always emphasized this is not an issue on which the Muslims should be disunited. Somebody wishes to celebrate the Mawlid in any particular way, that's fine as long as it's not going beyond the boundaries of the Sharia. Somebody who thinks that Mawlid is not something that's necessary in Islam, that's also fine, and he has his dalils, and that's part of what it is to be a Sunni Muslim. When we maintained that principle, we were strong and united, and we created great civilizations that conquered the world and endured for centuries. As soon as we started to fight amongst ourselves and become suspicious and to have this darkness in our hearts and this jealousy and this nervousness and this polemical spirit, things started to crumble and we started to fall apart. Today, whole countries are threatened by this. Just yesterday, I was listening to a lecture by a strong supporter of the State of Israel who was saying that the great miracle now for Israel and its people is the fighting in the region between the Sunnis and the Shia. And he says this is a miracle that will save the Israelis. He's so happy. He said this in a big public lecture to non-Muslims. He's so happy because they're at each other's throats. Historically, they didn't do that. There was the mutual respect. There was the ikhtilaf. But now, we've become so far from our usul that we're fighting each other. So we have a choice. We can either be, as it were, sharp swords, favoured weapons in the hands of Islam's enemies, swords used to stab the sacred shrine, the mazar of Islamic unity, the best weapon that they'll ever have. If we're saying he's right and he's wrong, and this is right and this is wrong, when all are within the possible boundaries of truth as established by the classical usul, or we can stand for the principle of Muslim unity and say, this is my madhab, but there's another madhab, and I respect you as long as you're sincere and you have your dalil. This is a choice which we have. Either we become weapons in the hands of the enemies of Islam and we say, Mawlid must be celebrated, or it must not be celebrated, and we use this as a means of disunity when it's a far' and not an asl, or we can try and return, overcoming the insecurities and the egos and the solidarities that are within us in our lower parts and say, all of this is part of the broad circle of Sunni truth. This is important because whole countries are being torn to pieces with no hope of restitution. Pakistan is now breaking apart because people can't understand the original Sunni principle of mutual respect and respect for different ijtihads. Once law and order breaks down, it's certainly not clear how it's going to be re-established again. So we need to be careful. We're on the brink of something dangerous. But alhamdulillah, our Sunni tradition is enshrined in the teachings of people like Imam Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi, who says many times in his Ihya Ulumuddin, having seen the weakness in Islam of the day caused by people arguing over furu' and not over usul, and trying as hard as he could to try and include as many as he could, excluding some of the philosophers, Ibn Sina, some of the Ismailis and others, he says, they're outside the circle of truth and haqq and Islam. But he tries to include as many as possible. In his Ihya, in his Faisal al-Tafriqah, in his Mustazhiri, in his Minhaj, in his great works, the reviver of this deen, in his Ihya Ulumuddin, is saying, whatever you do, don't engage in ta'assub. In the Ihya he says, one of the greatest veils in the progress towards your creator is a ta'assub lil madhab, fanaticism for a school of thought. Doesn't matter what it is, if you're a fanatic for it, if your ego is engaged, if you're kind of furious because somebody has made a comment on a web discussion page that this is right and this is wrong, if your ego is roaring, and usually when it's a case of haqq and batil, the ego is the first thing to stand up and start shouting, and reason and knowledge are far behind, then you're part of the problem that the Imam has described. And this is important. To follow Sunni Islam really means to follow the manhaj of Imam al-Ghazali and the scholars who followed him. There's nothing of the quality and the definitive nature of the Ihya Ulumuddin. No book can compete with it in this ummah. So read what he says about fanaticism for a particular madhab. So we need to remember this before it's too late, before the sacred principle of Muslim unity is torn into 1,000 pieces because we don't understand what it is to follow the Sunni usul and the classical ulama who come from the line of Imam al-Ghazali. So this is one of the things that we need to remember at this time, that to be trying to follow in those perfumed, miraculous, ancient footsteps is to be following the way of unity and reconciliation. The ego craves criticism of others, and it's hard to transcend that and to see the best in others and to try and find excuses for them. The Sunni breakthrough is that they said as-sahaba kulluhum udul, and that subsequently, following the path of Imam Ibn Furak and Imam al-Bayhaqi and Imam al-Qushayri and Imam al-Ghazali and Fakhruddin al-Razi and the great ones of that great blessed period who really define in detail what it is to be a member of Sunni Islam, this respect for ikhtilaf, and particularly amongst as-Sada as-Sufiya. Imam al-Ghazali is writing the Ihya as a kind of general text for Muslims. You don't have to be a Sufi to follow everything that's in the Ihya, really. Tariqa affiliation is neither here nor there. It's general instructions for how to be a happy, decent, sound, balanced, spiritually oriented human being, how to follow the path of the akhirah. But this principle of tark al-ta'assub lil-madhab, of not being fanatical and adhering to one particular fatwa or school of thought, is a particularly Sufi trait. Because what matters ultimately is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is all in all. He is the beginning, He is the end, and He is the ground of everything that exists. And the only thing that really counts in this dunya is whether you remember Him or whether you don't. They're like al-ahya'i wal-amwat in the hadith. You are alive if you remember that behind this form there is luminous meaning and unity and rahmah and mercy. And you are dead if you just see the form. Even if you think you're really living a cool life, if none of it means anything, then you're not really alive, and you'll be distracted by 1,000 things in your day and not fully an integrated and a directed human being. This is the basis of every spirituality: remembrance, dhikr. Udhkurullaha dhikran kathira. We have heard, remember Allah with an abundant remembrance. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ came to remind his people, لِيُنذِرَ قَوْمًا مَا أُنذِرَ آبَاؤُهُمْ فَهُمْ غَافِلُونَ, to remind a people whose ancestors had not been warned, so they were heedless. Ghafla, the opposite of dhikr, and that's where we're at. 99.9% of websites are ghafla. 99.9% of television is ghafla. The world is distracted by distraction, so that people can, when we're not paying close attention to what they're doing, can put their hands in our pockets and take our money. Most of it is about that, and we buy into it. We love it. We race after this, and then we're told that this is cool, and the latest phone, and the latest car. We spend our lives on that, and never considering, really what it is that we are about. Ghafla is a curse. It is darkness. It is to turn away from the light, which is all that truly exists. So what we need in following this Sunni Islam in its outward form is respect for ikhtilaf of fatwas, and in Islam to have one principle above all else, which is that the dunya is mal'una, mal'unun man fiha. As he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the earth is cursed, and cursed is what is upon it, except for dhikrullah and those who remember him. Everything else is just shadows. The shadows have no meaning in themselves. What is a shadow? What is its substance? The light is what's real. Take away the light and what remains of the shadow. But unfortunately we've forgotten that and we're distracted by the shadows. But the dhikr is what reminds us of the light. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ came to bring his people min al-zulumati ila nur, from the shadows into the light. So distracted were they by matter that they thought that statues and natural phenomena and things were kind of conscious, very primitive, not seeing the obvious fact that everything is absolutely and universally and helplessly dependent upon the fiat, the command of its one source. The many things in creation make no sense unless they're attributed to a single source. The many does not come from the many comes from the one. Lose the principle of the one and you get lost in the many, and that's the condition of modernity. So obsessed are we with the many that we're digging up the treasures of the earth and then filling the holes with our garbage and polluting even the ecosystem. So obsessed are we with quantity, the reign of quantity, more and more and more stuff. Even the planet, that extraordinary gift, is kind of wilting under the burden of a greedy humanity. Even the secularists are starting to freak out because they can see where their greed and their materialism is leading. It takes that, the collapse of the ecosystem, the poisoning of the seas and the air, before they'll actually wake up to the fact that what they're doing is not what human beings should be doing. But we, not looking at the shadows, should be looking at the light. Dhikr, the most precious thing. Do not underestimate any moment of remembrance of Allah. And do not feel proud of any moment in which you were not remembering Him. Because you've been given only a short time in this dunya. Few breaths and it's over. And the older you get, the quicker it goes. How many generations have gone before us? I saw the news this morning. They found footprints on a beach in Norfolk from 800,000 years ago. Whose footprints? What was his life? What did he believe? Just a shadow. Even his bones are long gone. We'll be like that. Not here for long. The candle is snuffed out. So pay attention. And the only thing that is useful in this world is to remember dhikrullah. And the blessing of that is that you find peace. بِذِكْرِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Why was he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a man of serenity? Look at the stresses. What situation would we be in inwardly if we were faced with the threat of annihilation from Quraysh and the munafiqeen within and the Byzantines massing at the frontier and just a few believers and the Battle of Badr? That was a stressful situation. We complain about not being able to afford the council tax or whatever it is that we grumble about. But look at that situation. And the munafiqeen afraid. إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. The people are ganging up on you, so be afraid of them. But what did they say? حَسْبُنَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. They remembered Allah. They said, Allah is enough for us and an excellent guardian. That's what we should do. If we see all of these misfortunes, inwardly and outwardly and globally, we should say, حَسْبُنَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. Not attribute blame or come up with conspiracy theories or blame this politician. They're just phenomena that happen when the Muslims forget, when the world sees our ugliness and not our beauty. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel should be inscribed on our hearts. That should be our state when we see these misfortunes. Remembering Allah. Remember and remember and remember. And even a moment of remembering Allah in a time of real absent-mindedness or stress or obsessive belief in cause and effect makes everything different and transforms and uplifts it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so pleased when He sees somebody remembering Him in this age of complete annihilation in desires, that He can give you extraordinary things. He can give you gifts and open gates for you which you never imagined, in this world or in the next. It's an extraordinary thing in this age where all human souls are black as soot, for there to be occasionally a chink of light where somebody is looking up from munching the grass and saying, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Astaghfirullah, and remembering his source. Don't underestimate that person. You see some old guy in the corner of the masjid, some toothless old person from some village, and you think, God, I better go to a different masjid, this is not cool. Remembering his Lord, that's all that matters in this world. It doesn't matter his language, his age, none of that has any significance at all. But if he's remembering Allah, the angels are with him, and he is what creation is for. He is the purpose of existence. He is remembering the one to whom the angels themselves could bow down. So honour that within you which is recalling the Messenger's practice of dhikr, constant recollection. That's what he was. Abid, dhakir. The remembrance of Allah was what gave him serenity amidst those stresses. And honour those who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have that primacy, and this is Imam al-Ghazali's insight, then you will really see the Messenger's gift. And you will learn to see the fiqh as something beautiful because it reminds you of your Lord. But you will not turn the fiqh into your qibla. And you will not turn the fatwas of your particular school of thought into your qibla. That's an interpretation. There are other interpretations. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this ummah an ummah in which rahmah is in the ikhtilaf. This is important because we have so many opportunities. A quarter of the world's population is facing the qibla. Alhamdulillah, everywhere, the masajid, despite ourselves, despite who we are, despite our desires, despite our rulers, despite our ulama, the masajid are full. In this country, more people go to the masjid now, they go to church. Who would have imagined that even 50 years ago? Alhamdulillah, there is much khair, but we have to show that this door which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is opening for us is something that we are deserving to pass through. Are we going to be fighting with each other? We won't go through the door if we're fighting. We're criticizing this and criticizing that, and whenever Muslims get together, it's just a list of complaints about other kinds of Muslims. Or are we going to celebrate the fact that what we're doing, despite all of these outer differences, is the remembrance, the thing that we really crave, the only thing that brings real calm to the heart. And who doesn't want to be calm in his heart? Nobody wants to be agitated and stressed out, as far as I know. Mawlana Rumi tells a story of a woman, and she's had a baby for the first time, and the baby's crying, and she's not really been told much about babies, and so the baby's crying, the baby's obviously hungry, so she sends somebody out, the servant out to the shop to buy some lokum, which is like Turkish delight, for the baby. Servant comes back, the baby doesn't want the lokum and it's crying, and it's kind of a beautiful baby but a nuisance because it's crying and screaming. She's agitated. And so she sends the servant out again, and the servant comes back with a big beautiful roast chicken, and they try to feed the roast chicken to the baby. And the baby screams and yells, and it's kind of, baby crying is a stressful sound. And they keep going through this until eventually, of course, the fitra steps in, and she gives it the breast. And the milk is what the baby needs. What's the point of the story? Mawlana Rumi is telling us that we're all yelling like babies. We're all upset, we're all stressed, we're all agitated, things are not right, things are inappropriate, we don't know what to do. What do we need? What is the baby within crying for? It's crying for dhikrullah. We give it so many other things. You're feeling stressed out, buy a new car. You're not happy, trade in your wife for somebody younger. You want to get rich, maybe try a scratch card or a new business or whatever. It never really works. Usually it brings 10 additional problems to every one that we think it's solved. That's the nature of dunya. But give it what it really needs. Give the baby what it's shouting for, which is something that's available and every Muslim knows what it is. Give it Allah's speech. Give it the hadith of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Just say, Allah. In the middle of that crowd, in the middle of that exam, in the middle of that stressful traffic jam, just say Allah, and that's it. And you'll feel that calmness. If the Allah is coming from your heart, just from the tongue, it's not the same. The tongue can move around and perform all kinds of clever gymnastics, but that's just physiology. If the heart is saying Allah, everything else will calm down, and you will calm down, and you will start to drink that milk. And it is the milk that was offered to the Quraysh and offered to ourselves if we're interested, if we have a taste for it, by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is why we remember him at this time of year, and we remember him inshallah at all times of the year. There's no time when it's not appropriate to celebrate him. Dhikrul ni'ami wajib. The remembrance of blessings is an obligation. And we should do this all the time, because without him, where would we be? If he had not been born in that dusty Arabian town so many years ago, where would we be now? Down the pub, Ladbrokes, wherever. We all know where the nafs would like us to be. But alhamdulillah, through him, the blessing that has been shown, the possibility of human transcendence, to be better human beings, to be happier human beings, to be more loving human beings, to be at peace with ourselves and the world, shown through the Sharia and the Sunnah of the chosen one, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Blessing, the greatest blessing ever, it's in our hands. But let's not throw it away. Let's not argue over it. Let's celebrate it. Let's share it with others. Let's see what it can do to uplift and illuminate our communities, so that Islam is not just a list of issues but a list of solutions, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed His message and His messenger to be. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us people whose hearts are like diamonds, to be people for whom His remembrance is easy, to make us people for whom disobedience to Him is the ugliest thing to us, to make us people who love the unity of this ummah and have respect for the ulama of this ummah, and wish to see this ummah strong and united, and who learn and who study and who understand the usul and the furu', and are brought incredible joy by the remembrance of this anniversary, this time when the gates to paradise were opened and the light flooded out, and to give us, inshallah, some portion of that light, so that it be with us in our graves, and so that we do not pass through this brief life simply in darkness, following our pleasures and following our egos. Insha'Allah, only He can move the hearts. Wa muqallib al-qulub. So at this time, insha'Allah, we ask Him to turn our hearts back towards Him, back towards the Qibla, back towards the only source of any possible solution for ourselves, through, insha'Allah, the blessing of the recollection of the beautiful heart of the Chosen One. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
يا إمام